everybody, Lauren Kudlowik here. Have you ever tried to make homemade pasta by yourself? Well, I'm going to show you how to make that happen today. I personally think that fresh pasta just tastes so much better than the box pasta that you can get. Not trying to knock box pasta. I do use it myself, but when I have the opportunity to make my own pasta and a homemade sauce, there's just nothing like it. So I'm going to show you how to make the dough and cut it out today so that you can use fresh pasta with your favorite dishes as well. I'm starting with my grandmother's recipe, Helen Busey. She was an Italian lady, very fiery spirit, said exactly what she was thinking on a given occasion, but she also taught me a lot about Italian cooking and showed me a lot of love. And so I wanted to show you guys the recipe that she taught me how to make. It's especially memorable for me to look back on, Christmas holiday traditions. She taught me how to make this particular recipe, and we use this dough to make a stuffed pasta called tortellis. So she made the filling first, and then she made the dough that I'm going to show you here today. I'm just going to show you how to turn the dough into a spaghetti or a linguine, and I'll show you two more cuts that you can do, like a fusilli and a bow tie pasta that you can use as well. But she would actually turn this recipe into a tortelli, and you can actually use it for ravioli as well. So let's get down to the ingredients of your dough. So first we're gonna start with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and I sifted here 1 cup already, and I'm gonna add another cup to our counter here. And the reason why I have it on the counter is that whenever and if you use like a little hand sifter, you can use a hand crank sifter as well. We're gonna put that through the sifter, and it basically breaks up a lot of those lumps that are in the flour. I'm also gonna add to my flour mixture here 1 teaspoon of salt. You can actually make this recipe in any ratio that you want. So if you wanted to do 6 cups of flour with 6 eggs, you could do that as well. If you just wanted to make like a single serving, you could do 1 cup of flour and 1 egg. So it's really whatever you would like it to be, and then you can kind of press down those lumps that are in there. Typical flours are pre-sifted, but I personally, for this particular recipe, because we're making a homemade pasta, I think it just makes for a smoother dough. So right here I have 2 cups of flour and 1 teaspoon of salt, and I'm gonna go ahead and make a well. If you think about a well being like you had mashed potatoes on your plate and you were gonna go pour gravy in it, that's basically what we're doing here. We need a well that is big enough for us to pour in the equivalent amount of 2 eggs. So I have 2 eggs here, and I'm gonna go ahead and beat those up with my fork just so that I get the yolk and the white evenly mixed and distributed here. And this is our well that we're gonna use. I've heard people call it a volcano, if you will, but it's really not gonna be a volcano that like shoots over. We're gonna use our fork to whisk in the flour inside to the egg. So I'm gonna add my beaten 2 eggs to the middle of my well, and then we're gonna take that flour and kind of work it in and whisk it in a little bit at a time. Now, not all of this flour will be worked into the dough. Some of it is gonna be used for helping us knead the dough and to prevent sticking. So don't worry if you don't get all of that flour in there, it is perfectly okay. We do need a lot of flour to kind of contain that egg in the well situation that we have going on. So your well is gonna get a little bit bigger. My gram, we would put like 10 cups of flour. She had like this special pasta board that she had made for the purpose of our tortelli making around Christmas time. And we would do like this giant amount of pasta, and we would do it several times because we made so many tortellis because there was many of us to eat for Christmas. So she is no longer with us. She passed last year in 2019, but whenever I make homemade fresh pasta or the tortelli recipe, always reminds me of her and my grandfather. So as you get the more amounts of flour in, you're gonna notice that your mixture is becoming a little bit less liquidy, which is good. I like to take my fingers and kind of scrape off some of that dough that's sticking to the fork, and this is just a regular table fork. Scrape off any bits that are stuck to the counter because you don't want to lose that good egg mixture. Some people will actually use like pureed spinach or pureed sun-dried tomatoes to make their own homemade like spinach pasta or sun-dried tomato pasta. So you could actually flavor this pasta if you wanted to, with some other ingredients like vegetables and things like that, pureed vegetables. So I think that I kind of like where I'm at right now. I have a lot of that flour worked in here, and so now I'm gonna set my fork off to the side, and I'm gonna go ahead and gather this dough up, and I'm gonna start kneading it. So basically I wanna work that dough together into one dough ball. And as I notice that my dough is sticking to the counter, you can kind of pull in more flour as time goes on. What your goal is to have a dough that is almost like the consistency of a sugar cookie dough, if you know what I mean by that. You don't want it to be rock hard because that's gonna be really hard to roll out, but you also don't want it to be super liquidy because then whenever you go to roll it out, it's gonna stick all your counter, and that's not really good. So I like to go ahead and knead this. And again, if you have any pieces that are stuck to the bottom of your board, you can go ahead and scrape those up and then work those into your dough as well. If you have a lot of flour, this is the point where you can kind of press that flour away and move it off to the side there. And we're gonna knead this just as we would bread dough. So basically we're going to, let me get some of this stuff off my hands here. My hands are getting all crusty with dough. We're gonna knead it like bread toast. So basically you take the heel of your hand and you do a pressing motion, turn 90 degrees, do a pressing motion, turn 90 degrees, fold it over and do a pressing motion. Now as we work this flour in there, it may start to stick to the counter again. You can kind of pull in a little bit more flour for that dough to take in a little bit more flour. But I'm actually very close to the consistency that I want. Now you notice that there is somewhat of a little bit of a waste of flour, but we're actually gonna use some of this flour whenever we roll it out in a few minutes. So it is completely okay. So my goal here is to get a dough that is nice and smooth. And so I'm noticing some stickiness here. We don't want any lumps in our dough because we want our dough, our pasta dough, to produce us a nice smooth pasta of whatever shape you choose. So whether you're choosing something like a spaghetti or a linguine, it's gonna have a nice smooth finish to it. You don't want little chunks of flour and stuff like that in there. So when my kind of rule of thumb for noticing and kind of determining when my pasta dough is done is that it's not sticking to the counter anymore. It comes up real nice and it's not sticking. So that's one sign that you have enough flour. Another sign is that whenever you look at your dough ball, okay, it kind of looks a little bit floury here, that's okay, is that it looks smooth, almost like the smoothness that you would want to see in a bread dough. And another thing, and this can kind of give you a visual of whenever it's done, you should be able to take your fingers and kind of press it into your dough and kind of squeeze that nice and easy. If you're trying to squeeze it and it's really, really rock hard, then you've probably put too much flour in it, and you might want to consider starting again. So at this point, I am really happy with my little ball of dough here. And now what you want to do is take plastic wrap and go ahead and wrap that dough up, because you don't want air to be exposed to it and make it really crusty. But we're gonna let this sit at room temperature for about 30 minutes, and then we'll start, I'll show you how to roll it out. All right, so I've let my dough rest for a little bit, and now we're going to take it out of our plastic wrap. And that flour that was there that we used for the making of our dough is gonna come in handy because we're gonna be rolling this out, and sometimes your dough, after it sits for a little bit, can become a little bit sticky, and that's normal. So I'm gonna take my flour that I had on the outsides of my pasta making, and I'm just gonna kind of set that down to prevent sticking. I'm gonna take that flour also to pat the outside of my dough, because the worst thing you want is your dough to be sticking all over the board. So if you do find that it is sticking a lot, you can feel free to grab it back up and work a little bit more flour into it if you need to. So now we're gonna turn our attention to our rolling pin. You wanna put a little bit of flour on the outside of your rolling pin. And this is the hand method for rolling out and cutting pasta. So most of you probably have a rolling pin at home, hopefully you do. If you don't, you could always borrow one from someone that you know. You can pick up your pasta like that, put a little bit more flour on it. You can feel free to turn it over. It's a pretty resilient dough that you can kind of move around a little bit. So now we're gonna kind of thin it out a little bit more. A lot of people have the stand mixers with the pasta press and the pasta cutter on it. If you want to go ahead and do that, I would recommend that you watch a YouTube video before attempting to do that for the first time. I'm showing you the hand method because most of you probably have a rolling pin at home, and you probably have a handy dandy pizza cutter, which is what we're going to use to cut our pasta. So in terms of low-tech materials, I wanted to show you guys how to do it by hand, because you probably have these two things at home. All right, so this flour that we really don't need anymore, do not put that back into your flour container. It's contaminated with egg and can transfer salmonella to, if there was salmonella in the egg, to your flour container. So don't put it back in there. That is garbage. So now we're gonna turn our attention to our flattened dough, and you have to think about what cut of pasta you want. So I'm gonna show you a couple different cuts that you can go with here. So the first of which I'm gonna show you is a general, like a flat, like linguine. You can cut it to the size of a spaghetti if you want to. I find the spaghetti is kind of hard to do with the pizza cutter. I think linguine or a fettuccine works out the best with the pizza cutter. And basically what you're gonna do is just make little even cuts as best as you can with your pizza cutter, and that's gonna give you nice, evenly sized pieces that you can drop into your water. And so I'll show you what these look like here so far. So you can pick up and you can see that that makes some beautiful little pieces of linguine that you can use for a fettuccine alfredo or fettuccine alfredo. Nice little cream sauce there. A pesto sauce would taste great with that. So that's basically, you just cut all of your pieces evenly. You can let it dry on a cooling rack, or if you want your pasta to dry and use it on, a couple days later, or you can actually drop this into a pot of boiling salt water. This is gonna cook a lot faster than the pasta that you're gonna get out of the box. Box pasta is gonna cook in about in between 7 to 10 minutes, depending on what cut you're using. This is gonna cook in roughly like 3 to 4 minutes. So when it comes to the top and it's al dente, you taste it and it tastes right, that's when you know that it's finished. All right, I'm gonna show you two more cuts. One cut is gonna take a strip about this big. So you roll out your dough, cut it in half, and then give yourself a strip like this. I'm gonna make kind of like a take on fusilli, which is a twisted pasta. So I cut my strip like this. As you can see, I have 3 little pieces here. And then you're gonna take this and just give it a nice little twist. So you can go ahead and lay that out on the counter. You can lay that out on a cookie sheet until you get all of your pasta twists ready to go. I personally think the pasta twists or the fusilli keep their shape a little bit better if you let them dry out overnight and then pop them into the water. They don't tend to hold their shape as well whenever you use them fresh like this. So you basically, I'll show you again, you just take it and you give it a little twist, just like that. And then you wanna lay it out on your counter or on a cookie sheet if you wanna make it mobile, and you just let that dry like that for at least a couple hours, if not one day. All right, the other one that I'm gonna show you is a bow tie pasta. So you're gonna roll out your dough and then you're gonna cut probably a chunk that is about 1 inch in length, like that. And then what I like to do is the middle tends to be a little bit thicker and cook. It doesn't cook as well as the outside does. So I actually take my rolling pin and put a nice little notch right into the middle. If you can notice that, it makes it a little bit thinner. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna make little cuts that are gonna be the shape of my my farfalle or my bow tie pasta, whichever you would like to call it. Make little strips, and then within each strip, you're gonna basically just take that middle and squish it together, okay? If you don't do the rolling in the middle first, the middle gets really, really thick, and then this little middle part doesn't tend to cook as well. So I like those, and again, I would let those dry for a couple hours before you use them so that you can make sure that they hold their shape. So those are some different cuts of pasta that you can use. If you wanted to do something like a spaghetti, you would basically just take your pasta cutter and make little teeny tiny strands And I'm gonna say for me, like this is about as small as I can get it. That's pretty close to homemade spaghetti. If you get a pasta cutter, like the one that is with the KitchenAid attachment, the KitchenAid stand mixer attachment, you can really get really fine spaghetti with that one. But if you're doing it by hand, then you're kind of limited to the small strands that you can get with your pizza cutter. So I hope you guys give a try to homemade pasta. Not a lot of ingredients. It's flour, eggs, and salt, and then just a little bit of your time. So if you guys try, please share a picture with me. Good luck in your adventures of homemade pasta making. See you later.